witches! This sign I'm holding may just look like a pretty decoration to you, but I know it's really an enchanted object that I put a spell on to grow this YouTube channel. You can watch this video to get tips on creating your own social media growth spell, or you can ignore the spell stuff and get tips on customizing an unfinished wooden sign. Hopefully, some of you will learn from both the spell and the art techniques. Let's get into it. I found this Stay for a Spell sign at Michael's as part of their 2023 Halloween offerings, but you don't have to work with this specific sign. The Stay for a Spell message is perfect for my channel because I share spells in many of my videos, so if you're watching, you're actually staying for a spell. I'll be customizing the sign using unicorn spit. Yes, unicorn spit. We will get to that, including where it worked and where it was an epic fail for me. I'll also be using a metallic Sharpie, gesso, acrylic paint, polyurethane varnish, crushed glass, and resin. I decided to start with the back of the sign because the plain flat surface is perfect for writing down a spell or intention. First, I removed the jute rope that's stapled at the top for hanging. I intended to remove the staples at the top too and fill in those holes, but those things were industrial strength. I actually did more damage to myself than the staples when I scraped one of my fingers and even left a tiny blood streak on the wood. Adding blood to magical workings is a time-honored tradition, but for safety's sake, I'd advise you to just live with those staples. If you paint the back of the sign like I do, you'll barely see them in the end. I'm painting the back of the sign black because in magic, the color black is commonly associated with protection and warding off negativity. I can think of lots of reasons warding off negativity would be helpful in a social media growth spell where you're inviting strangers into your orbit. I want to say up front, this video is not sponsored, but I am going to talk about specific brands and products I use, including this Midnight's Blackness unicorn spit on the back of the sign. I chose to work with unicorn spit for the first time on this project. Why? Hello, it's called unicorn spit. You think I'm just gonna walk by a label like that in a store and not find a reason to try it? That is brilliant marketing, guys. You definitely got me. Unicorn spit, it's not exactly paint. On the bottle, it's called a concentrated gel stain. And I've got a couple important tips if you've never used it before. First tip, you don't need to use any primer. Instead, you want to wet your surface with clean water, both before you start applying the unicorn spit and throughout the process. Second tip, you can apply the unicorn spit to your art surface directly out of the bottle and then move it around using an art tool of your choice. Third tip, unlike with acrylic paint, this is not a situation where you're going to be doing multiple coats. If your first coat dries and you need to add more unicorn spit, you can apply water to reactivate the spit. But there isn't an advantage to letting your first coat dry and then applying more. This takes some getting used to. Keep in mind that the color will dry a little lighter, so aim to saturate the pigment to a darker level than the one you want to end up with. There's definitely a learning curve with this stuff, but if you make a mistake, add more water. You should even be able to wipe most of the unicorn spit off with a wet wipe or damp cloth and just start over as long as you haven't sealed it yet. After letting the Midnight's Blackness on the back of the sign dry for about 2 hours, I'm ready to write out my spell with a silver metallic Sharpie so it shines out from the black background. Bewitchcrafting is a magnet, attracting all the right viewers, promoting creativity, inspiring magical doers, sharing powerful art magic, trading ideas, we excel. I serve up witchy videos, and all of you stay for a spell. I don't always write spells so that they rhyme, but I did choose to write a rhyming poem for this spell for a couple of reasons. The sign itself has an old-timey charm that lends itself to a spell in poem form. Secondly, creating a rhyming spell takes extra effort, and it forces you to really clarify the most significant parts of your intention. That level of focus increases the attention that your brain gives to the process. Oh, we're spending an hour counting out syllables and choosing rhyming pairs. This must be really important. And thirdly, a lot of people, myself included, find rhymes more memorable. So a spell in verse form becomes something you'll be able to repeat to yourself more easily, even if it's not in front of you. And the repetition feeds the spell with more energy. In case you want to rewrite any part of the spell to better fit your personal situation, it might be helpful for you to know that the poem has 2 4-line stanzas. Each line has 8 total syllables, and the last word in the 2nd and 4th line of each stanza rhyme. The first word in my poem, Bewitch Crafting, is the name of this YouTube channel, and it happens to be 4 syllables. You could swap in your own channel or business name, or one of your social media handles. You could also change it to something like my Instagram or my Facebook page is a magnet. And the next line I write, attracting all the right viewers. The word right is key because I would much rather have a smaller audience of people who love my content than just getting any eyeballs, including hostile ones, on the channel. I go on to explain that my goal is to promote creativity and inspire magical doers to clarify the interests of the viewers I'm trying to attract. I also add that I want to share art magic, and I emphasize trading ideas because part of the appeal of being on a social media platform is the social aspect. I would love nothing more than to help foster a supportive community of like-minded art witches. Those might not be your goals. Maybe you don't care who looks at or follows your content, as long as people's eyes are on you. That's totally valid. Instead of attracting all the right viewers, you could put in attracting numerous viewers or attracting infinite viewers, and then swap in more information about your goals in the next lines. Just really quickly, some of you more eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that I've got 2 different spellings of the word magic in the poem. That's just a mistake. I meant to spell both forms of magic with a K after the C. The reason I like to do that, and you'll see many other witches do that, is because the K distinguishes witchy magic from stage magic. I don't often write out the word magical by hand, and I didn't catch my omission until it was already down in permanent marker. You know what? Mistakes are okay. A spelling error is not going to cancel out a spell like this, as long as you keep focus on your overall intention. But just in case the misspelling did have an effect on the spell, if you're a stage magician who felt an inexplicable pull to watch this video, will you please let me know in the comments? I also wanted to mention that if rhyming gives you hives, you can inscribe your intention in non-rhyming sentences. Or just forgo words altogether and instead draw out a sigil, which can serve as a graphical representation of your intention. After adding your spell to the back of the sign in whatever form you choose, give your Sharpie at least a few minutes to completely dry. Before you turn the sign over to decorate the front, you'll want to seal the back of the sign. I prop the sign up off the table with paint pyramids so that any overflow of the varnish will just drip off the sides onto the table covering. This prevents the sign from getting stuck to the table. If you don't have paint pyramids, other things like little plastic cups work just as well. I'm going to get way more into sealers when I talk about the front of the sign because mistakes were made and things went wrong. But for now, I'll just say the varnish I'm using is DecoArt Americana Duraclear Matte Varnish, which is a mouthful, but keep watching to learn why I probably should have made a different choice here. To apply the varnish, I drip some right on the sign, and then I use a paintbrush to apply long, gentle vertical strokes. Working quickly before it starts drying, I turn the sign 90 degrees and brush the varnish in perpendicular vertical strokes. Turning the work like this should help achieve a smoother finish with less visible brush strokes when the varnish dries. I let the first coat dry for a couple of hours, then I gently sand the sign and wipe off the dust. I apply a total of 3 coats of varnish. After letting my varnish sign dry overnight, I flip it over and gently sand the surface. I dust off the surface of the top of the sign and I notice that there are several streaky, smudgy patches on the front of the sign that were not there before I decorated the back. I'm pretty sure that what happened is that as I was varnishing the sign, I was getting varnish on my hands and then handling the sign. I'm not happy about it, but I did not yet realize how big a problem this would cause. You know what would have been a fantastic idea? Taping paper over the front of the sign to protect it before I started painting or sealing the back. You should do that. What you should not do is paint unicorn spit over a surface that has any varnish on it. Here I am, wetting the sign and then painting Midnight's Blackness all around the bottle without a care in the world. I'm still doing it. Yep, about half an hour later, still doing it. It looks fine right now. You guys, I'm totally the dumb blonde in the horror movie wandering through the creepy house with a flashlight, and we all know something bad is about to happen to her. In the meantime, let me show you how I paint the skull and crossbones and the sign's letters with unicorn spit. The letters are my favorite part. I start with the skull because it's at the top of the bottle, which means I'll be less likely to smudge it as I work top to bottom. For the skull and crossbones, I chose to mix whitening and more Midnight's blackness. I start by laying a base of whitening. To give the skull and crossbones some dimension, I very gently dab in some black in areas where you would expect to see shadows, like the sides and bottom of the skull and the lower parts of the crossbones. I'm aiming for subtle shading here. Start with less black because it's easier to add more in than it is to take it out. Then I go back in and add more bright white in areas where you would expect light to hit, like the upper crossbone and the forehead. Using multiple shades of unicorn spit is not unlike blending with watercolors. When I'm happy with the look of the skull and crossbones, I let them dry and take a break. Then I come back to paint the letters. I'll be honest, I didn't have a plan ahead of time for the letters other than blue. Is blue a plan? I add more clean water to the letters. Then, using Blue Thunder and Zia Teal, I pretty much randomly dot spit around. I drag my wet brush through the spit to spread it. That looks pretty, but it's not popping enough for me. So I go back in with more dots of spit, and here's where the magic starts to happen. I stumble on to what looks to me like marbling by ever so gently streaking the spit with a very wet brush. If I don't like the look of a letter, I just add more pigment and try again. A little patience is required here, but the end effect looks amazing. You should know that when you keep layering on the unicorn spit, you end up with a very thick, wet layer, and it takes much longer to dry. I check on the letters a few hours after painting them, but they're still wet, so I let them dry overnight. I do go back in at this point with some more black to clean up areas where blue is leaked beyond the letters. With the letters painted and dry, that brings us back to the tragedy that occurs when you paint unicorn spit over Duraclear varnish spots and then try to varnish on top of the layer of unicorn spit. At first, if you layer enough unicorn spit over the varnish, it looks like you're going to get away with it. See, there seems to be an opaque black layer over the sides of the sign. So far, so good. But then, when you apply the top layer of varnish, you get this. The unicorn spit immediately wears away and you end up with a streaky mess. So there are actually two problems here. Painting over the varnish spots was really my second mistake. My first mistake was the choice to use the Duraclear matte varnish. While it's an excellent sealer for acrylic paints, it is not a good choice for the water-based unicorn spit. It's the wrong sealer for the job. Then why are you using it, Dahlia? To quote a family favorite film, Drop Dead Gorgeous, I kinda misunderstood the assignment. Remember, when you add water to the spit, or a water-based product, the spit is reactivated and ready to be manipulated. The issue is that when you're sealing it, you want it to stay put. You don't want it to be manipulated. Turns out that Duraclear Sealer is a water-based polyurethane. I didn't fully comprehend that there are oil-based polyurethanes and water-based polyurethanes, and water-based polyurethanes send the wrong signals to the unicorn spit. Even though the Duraclear varnish worked pretty well on the back of the sign, you should probably find a non-water-based solution. I look at this terrible smudging that looks like a toddler put grubby fingerprints all over my pretty sign, and I ask myself, can I live with this? The answer is, hell no, absolutely not. This looks unbelievably awful. So my next thought is, can I save this with a Sharpie? I thought maybe. So I tried putting Sharpie over one of the worst smudges, but it was immediately apparent that the Sharpie black does not match the unicorn spit black. So then I asked myself, can I live with that? Yeah, hell no, absolutely not. This too looks unbelievably awful. There may have been another way to save this, but what I came up with was first sealing the skull and crossbones and the letters, because I actually loved how those looked, and then redoing the outline of the bottle. I sealed the parts I wanted to keep with 4 coats of the Duraclear. Seriously, Dahlia, you're still using Duraclear? Have zombies been feasting on your brains? I said mistakes were made. You can see that as I paint the Duraclear over the unicorn spit, some of the unicorn spit is re-wetting and coming off on the brush. Luckily, the blue letter layers especially are so thick that I don't think you can really tell I lost some of that, and by the third layer of Duraclear, there was enough sealer as a base that the unicorn spit stopped coming off on the brush. I do lightly sand between layers of Duraclear. Once that's dry, I proceed to sand the tragic parts of the bottle surface. And after wiping that clean, I apply 2 coats of black gesso over that mess with 1 hour dry time and sanding between coats. Immediately, the surface looks so much better. Once the second coat of gesso dries for over an hour, I add 2 coats of acrylic black paint and let that dry overnight. Then I return and paint 3 layers of the Duraclear varnish on top because unlike Duraclear and unicorn spit, Duraclear and acrylic paint are friends. As always, I sand between each coat of varnish. You have no idea how much I'd like to say that the painting and varnishing parts of this project are complete and you don't have to hear about them anymore. But unfortunately for all of us, you're gonna see I messed something up again coming up and I have to redo it because of course I do. But for now, I'll say while I had planned to use unicorn spit to color the entire project, I'm really happy with the end result. I'll definitely use it again, but I'll be a lot more careful about the surface it's applied to and the sealer I use with it. The next step is to really bring this sign to life by filling in the area of the bottle surrounding the words with crushed glass and resin. I've got black and cobalt blue crushed glass from Michaels. One of the reasons I love incorporating glass into my spell work is because the process to make glass involves all 4 elements. And elemental magic is extremely powerful. I start by mixing approximately equal parts of the black and blue crushed glass in a Ziploc bag. I set that aside while I mix up some epoxy resin. I'm trying Paduo epoxy resin for the first time. Paduo epoxy resin is an A-B resin, and you need to mix equal parts of A and B together. I fill the cup with B up to the 40 line and then add A until it reaches the 80 line. The 80 line ends up giving me way more resin than I needed. I would have had some to spare filling B to 30 and A to 60. I carefully and slowly stir parts B and A together with a popsicle stick for several minutes. Once the resin is blended, I set it aside for about 5 minutes to degas, which just reduces any bubbles. I start pouring the resin all around the letters. I use my popsicle stick and gravity to tilt it around so that it fills all the blank areas of the sign. I do accidentally spill some resin on the finished sides of the bottle. You know what we could have learned from the earlier part of the project where we didn't protect the front of the sign while we painted the back of the sign? We could have learned that taping off finished areas of the project while we work on unfinished areas of the project is always a good idea. Did we learn that? No, we did not. Then I start scooping my crushed glass mixture onto the resined areas of the sign. I again use the popsicle stick to gently move the crushed glass so that it fills the entire background area. Oh wow, it's so pretty. But I realize I still have some resin smears on parts of the bottle, and I have the oh-so-bright idea to clean it up using rubbing alcohol-soaked cotton balls. This seems smart because rubbing alcohol is great at removing uncured resin from many surfaces. You know what else rubbing alcohol is great at removing? Turns out rubbing alcohol is also great at removing polyurethane varnish and acrylic paint. Yes, we're at the point in this video where I get to admit that I messed up again. My bright idea left me with a streaky, distressed-looking finish on the black parts of the bottle. This is actually a cool technique to put in your pocket if you ever want a distressed look to your sign. However, I do not want a distressed look to this sign. I want uber glam witch. So I decide to redo it again. I determine the best thing to do is just redo all the black parts of the bottle so it looks uniform. But I let the resin cure for about 48 hours first because I do not want to mess that up while I'm trying to fix the other thing I messed up. I begin by rubbing another rubbing alcohol-soaked cotton ball all over the black part of the bottle to take down some of that varnish because, well, we already know that works really well, so why not? Next, I sand the surface again, then I wipe off the sanded areas with a damp paper towel. I skip the gesso this time and repaint 2 coats of the black acrylic paint. After letting that dry overnight, I seal it with 4 coats of the Duraclear varnish. And oh my goth, we're finally done. See, there's almost always a way to save a project, Even when it looks like the worst thing you've ever seen, you can usually recover as long as you're willing to put more time into it. I worked on this sign on 8 different days over almost 3 weeks, but it was worth it. I'm telling you that because in so many of the craft YouTube videos I watch, it looks like people are finishing projects in an hour or 2, and I just want to be real with you. I definitely made mistakes that slowed me down quite a bit, and I had a lot of other things going on in my life. But this was a 3-week project for me. I think at a minimum, you should expect something like this to be done over 4 or 5 days due to the drying and curing times. If you've made it all the way through this saga, I hope that even my dumbest choices were helpful in a, hey, no need to try that because it will not end well kind of way. But I know what you really want to know. Did the spell work? I'm finishing this video a few days before posting at the beginning of October 2023, and my channel has just under 100 subscribers. If you're watching this soon after I post it, there probably won't be much difference. But if you're watching this video months or years into the future, look at how many subscribers my channel has now and let me know where I'm at in the comments. My plan is to keep feeding this spell with energy by displaying the sign in the background of many of my future videos. Do I think that any future growth my channel has is all because of this spell? Of course not. For one thing, I've got to hold up my part of the bargain and serve the best witchy videos that I can. But at the end of the day, the process of creating this sign helped me clarify what I want to accomplish with my YouTube channel, and it pushed me creatively. If you're inspired to try something similar, I'd love to hear about it. And if you want to see a video about a different kind of spell bottle, check out my Tarot Spell to Find Your Life Purpose video next. Be well and be witchcrafting.